Hi, welcome to Finding Fuscata. I'm Sean. This is Fundamentals number 2, and where we are going to talk about the 7 Hermetic Principles. I bring these up because it's very important to understand these when you are trying to understand the law of attraction or the law of assumption or manifestation or prayer or just how to live life, even if those things don't even come across your radar at all. There are certain fundamental things to understand about how the world works. And as you start going on your spiritual journey, one of the greatest lessons that you will learn, that I've learned, is that there's truly no separation between the spiritual and the physical. And the more that we understand the physical, the more we can understand the spiritual. And the more we understand the spiritual, the more we can understand the physical. And this book is the reference that I use. It's called the Kabbalion. There's some controversy around it because some people say that it isn't really Hermetic philosophy. It isn't really the 7 Hermetic Principles. The principle of vibration in here causes some controversies and whatnot. And feel free to look that stuff up and chase those things down. But what I have found is that understanding these principles and learning how to apply them in your life is an absolute game changer. And as you go through the course, you'll learn more about those too. But what I want to do though is just read to you the 7 Hermetic Principles as they're outlined in this book. There is also an 8th Hermetic Principle, but that's something we'll talk about later because that's a more detailed concept all on its own. So, without further ado, the first principle is mentalism, and it's the idea that the all is mind, the universe is mental. And when it writes it in here, it writes the all as all capital letters, capital THE, capital ALL, the all. And you may understand that differently than how I do, but the meaning is that it's not just God or Holy Spirit or however you think of and conceptualizing those things, but it is it's the unreal and the real. It's the manifest and the unmanifest. It's the all. Like literally, if you can conceptualize of it, if it ever did exist, if it ever will exist, if it ever could exist, if it does exist, then that is the all. Okay? And all of that is mental. Not mental like the way we used to say it in the 80s, like, oh, you're mental. But it's mind. Okay? So we'll unpack that more as we go along. Second principle is correspondence. You've probably heard this, but it's as above, so below, and as below, so above. And some people will add as within, so without, and as without, so within, which ties into the mirror principle, which is something that we'll go into later, but is a highly, highly effective principle to apply in your life to be able to start to see the changes in your life that you want to see. So, third one is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. And we know this from physics, that everything down at the atomic and subatomic levels, everything's vibrating down there. This table appears to be solid, but we know that it's mostly empty space, and the things that make it up are just energy, and they're vibrating at a certain frequency, and so it comes together and looks like a table that we can use, right? Fourth principle is polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has its poles. Everything has its pairs of opposites. And in this, you will get the idea that there's really no such thing as hot or cold, right? Like the thing that we call cold here could be something that's hot somewhere else. Or the thing that we call hot here could be cold somewhere else. Like when I was in Alaska, it was January, and it was like 15 or 20 degrees below zero. And I was taking a class with a bunch of other folks, and we showed up, and we were all like bundled up in our heavy parkas. And then another group of people came that we didn't know. They came from another base, and they were all in short sleeve shirts. And we said, how do you guys do this? It's 20 below. How are you wearing short sleeve shirts? And they said, oh, easy. We came from Fairbanks, and for the last month, it's been 40 below up there. So 15 below, 20 below feels great, right? Just like, if you go outside, there's a big difference between 60 degrees and 80 degrees. There's also a big difference between 20 below zero and 40 below zero. So who can say what's hot and what's cold? Although if you're in Alaska, that for a human, that's cold. Anyway, but polarity also has to do with the idea that, if you go far enough north, you'll eventually start going south. And, everything has that variability, within the middle. So that's that. The next principle is number 5 is the principle of rhythm, which says everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. So I'm a modern man. So there was a meme a little while ago asking modern men how often they thought about Rome. And I was one of them. My wife asked me that, and I would think about Rome 2 or 3 times a week. But the fact is that the Roman Empire fell a long time ago. There's some arguments to be made about that, but we won't get into it right now. The idea is that empires rise and fall. Seasons come and go. The, stars rise and fall. Not, George Clooney, but like the sun. Even George Clooney, rise and fall. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But all of those things, there's a rhythm to all those things. And once you start to pick up on the rhythm of things in your life, the same way that you can pick up on the seasons, you'll start to learn when's a good time to plant, when's a good time to sow, when's a good time to just do nothing, when's it's a good time to celebrate, because all that stuff comes in rhythms, right? All right, so the 6th principle is cause and effect. So every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. And it seems weird because in the Kabbalion it says that randomness and chance are just the words that we use because we cannot fully understand cause and effect, right? So if you see a speck of dust floating by, you might think it's just randomly a speck of dust floating by, but even that speck of dust has a cause. Maybe it's a piece of ash from a tree that burned a year ago somewhere on the other side of the continent, and now it's floating past you because it's been spread out so much. And similarly, that same little piece of ash that's floating by you and seems like a random piece of dust is eventually going to land somewhere and get turned back into soil or absorbed back into the earth, and worms will come and trees will grow and things will happen, and but it's still part of that. So the random thing was caused and does become an effect, no matter how small or minute that might be. It's very important to keep that in mind. And then the last principle, the 7th principle, is gender. And this says gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. Now, in the modern Western world, we tend to think of gender in terms of man and woman, of sexuality, but that has actually very little to do with what gender is in this sense. So, except for the idea that masculinity, the masculine principle, is the penetrative principle, and the femininity or the feminine principle is the receptive principle. Like we're thinking about, 8th grade biology class, and you're learning how human reproductive plumbing works, and one side's penetrative and the other one's receptive. And that's how it works. And not just, right? So, but that same principle of penetrative and receptive works on all levels. There are some things that push and some things that receive. Okay, and there are certain ways of being that are helpful in one, and then certain ways of being that are helpful in another. And the idea is to be able to master those within yourself. So those are the 7 Hermetic Principles as laid out according to the Kabbalion. We'll go more into depth into that as things progress, but I just wanted to cover those real quick. So let me go over the summary from the booklet. Point 1 is that manifestation feels random until you deeply understand their 7 Hermetic Principles. Okay, so I would encourage you to go get a copy of this, read through these, spend some time. There's loads and loads of videos on YouTube. There's podcasts. There's all kinds of crazy stuff breaking down the Kabbalion and the 7 Hermetic Principles. And take time to meditate on each one of those. In fact, I would challenge you during this upcoming week, just take one a day and just say, as you're doing your morning meditation or as you're doing your moment of mindfulness for the day, just say, on this one day, we're just going to focus on mentalism. Like, what does that mean? What is the all? How does that kind of stuff work? What does that do? And then the next day, you think about correspondence and you discipline your mind to only think about correspondence. And do that for a week and really look at how they each work. And, maybe even get a copy and, each day read a chapter, or read the further descriptions about each of these to let those absorb into you. Okay. They're going to become very, very important. And the reason is that, like this says, manifestation can feel random. This is why I can only speak to Christian circles, but I'm almost 100% sure it happens in every religious circle, that people will say that when you pray to God, when you pray for something, God's answer is either yes, no, or wait, which basically means there's no God. Because, like, if the answer is yes, then it's going to happen. If it's no, it's not going to happen. If it's wait, then it's just... But then basically, like, nothing's happening. That's just all leaving everything up to chance, right? But what I started to learn on my spiritual journey, and the reason I'm putting all these things together, is that I noticed that some people just regularly got answers to prayer. And some people just never got answers to prayer. And it was never acceptable to me. I could never reconcile the idea that some people were just better. Maybe God favored some people more than others. Like, that didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I started looking at the mechanics of it. Like, what actually works? Like, what's actually happening? How do those people actually get what we call answer to prayer? And those people don't. Because for a long time, I was among those that don't. What I found is that when you apply these principles, in your life, manifestation, answer to prayer, law of attraction, law of assumption, blah, all that kind of stuff, stops feeling random. And it feels deliberate. You feel like you really are creating your reality, and you see how you are creating your reality, and you see why your reality is the way that it is, right? And then when you understand these and apply them, if you don't like the reality that you're in, now you have the tools, the mental capabilities, you have the mental toolkit to create a path out. Maybe. Probably. There's a good chance. Okay? At least you have a fighting chance. So, anyway. Second thing from the summary is, don't worry about mastering any of the principles. That could take a lifetime or more. Like, you're never going to fully understand mentalism. Like, you're never going to fully understand polarity. Like, you'll never fully understand the mirror principle. Like, nobody ever will. You could, there's a quote from Merlin. I wish I remember where this actually came from. But the wizard, Merlin, I remember in one passage he said that one of his greatest wishes was that he could have 1,000 chances to live. And in one lifetime, he would master agriculture. In another lifetime, he would master engineering. In another, he would master all these other disciplines. And then in the next lifetime, he could come back and practice those. And then by the time he had mastered all those, he would have forgotten some, and he can come back and live another one and master that all over again, or find a different way to, to broaden those horizons. And I can identify with that. I really can. It sounds silly, but my favorite band is Supertramp. Is a 60s, 70s progressive rock, slightly pop band. Anyway, But I love Supertramp, and some of their songs are so profound, and the musicality is just so wonderful that I've often wished that if I could reincarnate, then I would like to come back as Roger Hodgson. I would like to come back as Rick Davies. I would like to come back as the bass player, and I'd like to come back as, the saxophonist is Honey, I forget his name, but anyway, all those different people, and to live their lives and to learn about what influenced them to make that music. How did they do that so well? How did they make these sounds? How did they expand their vocal capabilities? How did they learn how to move their fingers like that? Like all those different sorts of things. And I would love to be able to spend however many lifetimes it would take for me to like go through all of Supertramp's music and live each lifetime of each person that played each one of those songs in all of their recordings and all of their live shows, like to be able to experience that, right? But in this lifetime, like this says, don't worry about manifesting any of these, mastering any of these principles. In this lifetime, I'm not even going to master the piano well enough to play it like Roger Hodgson, right? It's not going to happen because I don't have those natural abilities. I was wired for something else. But anyway, so don't worry about it. Just don't. Anyway, and the third thing, this is very, 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 very important. Please, this is very important. The third idea in this summary is to keep most of these things private, not a secret. So in our family, we have a practice of distinguishing between things that are private and things that are secret. And most of the time, if something's secret, it's not good. We don't like to keep secrets. Because you think about the implications of a secret, and it's something where you are trying to get, it's something that you're ashamed of, or maybe you're trying to get leverage over somebody else, or like you think about playing cards, like if you're playing poker, you want to keep your cards a secret. You don't want anybody else to know because you want to have the advantage, right? That's a secret. Or if something bad has happened, like if somebody is doing something to somebody else and they'll say, this is our secret, because they don't want it to be exposed. So it has to remain a secret, okay? These things aren't secret. They aren't meant to be secret. And while sometimes there are secrets that do need to be kept, there are a lot of times when secrets should not be kept. And this, in our time, in our day, is not something that should be kept secret. Private, yes, which goes back to the idea that Christ talked about, where he said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't take your good ideas and put them out to the dogs, or else they'll trample over them and come back and consume you. So there are some things to be kept private. And what I have found in my own journey is that when I talk to people who aren't ready to hear these things, then they come back and they say hurtful things, or they say discouraging things, or they knock me off my path. And those things can happen to you as well. So I won't discourage you from talking to anybody. Talk to anybody you want. These things are not secret. But I would encourage you to be judicious. And that's all. There are some things that are better kept private, or only talked about between, trusted people who are there at your level of consciousness, right? Like there are some things that at my level of consciousness and awareness that I won't say to anybody that I don't know is there at that same level of consciousness, right? In the same way that I'm not going to talk to a child about like how humans actually reproduce. That would be traumatizing and terrible, right? And you'll find that as you grow in your levels of consciousness, there are things that you will see and there are things that you will come to understand, which aren't bad. They're just part of the natural way that the world works. But that you would never go back and talk to your, absolute King James Version fundamentalist Christian uncle. Because, he'd be flabbergasted. He wouldn't know what you were talking about. He'd think you were demon-possessed and insane. When you've just studied and expanded more, right? So that's what I mean. Keep some of those things private. All right. So now we're going to do the internal work. This is the work for you to do this week. And we're going to write out these answers. So the first one is the easiest thing in the world, and it's to just list the 7 Hermetic Principles. Not from memory. Get a copy of the book. Go on YouTube or Google or Bing or however you choose to, and just get them. Write them. Just write them down. It's very helpful. Okay. The next thing. Of the 7 Hermetic Principles, select one that resonates most with you and describe your thoughts and feelings about it. So for me, there are different principles that resonate at different times. So for a long time, I was really thinking, I spent a lot of time meditating on the principle of gender, especially when, like in my lifetime, there has been a huge rise in the acceptability and presence of homosexuals in the community. And I remember a time when I was a child when homosexuals were like, that was only something that happened in the weird parts of Boston and in San Francisco, and otherwise we just didn't talk about it. And they were certainly not allowed in the military, and you couldn't be in churches, and that was just how the world was. But as time has progressed, and we've learned more about it, and we've all become more understanding and more accepting, then, we see that some people are just, born like that, and that's how the world is, and they're perfectly wonderful, delightful people to have around. And in many ways, the world is a better place for having them and welcoming them into our communities. Like I joke around that some of the towns in the U.S., there's one town not too far from where we live, and it was like an early 1900s town, like 1920s town, when New Jersey was really, really thriving, and it was kind of crumbling and falling apart. But then I want to say they like opened up a gay bar, or for some reason it became well known as a gay community. And man, within like a couple of years, that town went from just kind of falling apart and okay to fabulous. It's great now. It's got like cute restaurants and everything's just like nice, and the homes are just nice and everything's great, So I've joked a lot that, and it's only half of a joke, is that if your town's falling apart, then you need to just have the gays come in and they'll make it fabulous. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But that's what I've seen happening in the world. But the thing is that, at times in my life, I've obsessed about this idea of gender. And it was when I was really, really contemplating those things and seeing what's good and what's bad and what's not, and how does it work, and what is gender, and how does all the kind of things fit together, right? So, but I'll say that for right now, the one that resonates with me most is the idea of mentalism. I'm constantly driving my understanding deeper of what the all is, of the unreal and the real. And so that's the thing that resonates with me most, because my thoughts and my feelings of it are that I think we're on the cusp of understanding the nature of reality. And I believe that once we as a species start to understand that what we call the unreal is just as real as what we call the real, and when we as a species start to understand that this is a holographic projection, that's when we as a species will collectively evolve to the next level. And I'm always looking for it. I'm always trying to see what that is. How can I understand more? Because I deeply believe in the 100th monkey principle. I know it's not scientifically proven, but I believe in tipping points, and I believe in spreading ideas, and I believe in that once we get to a point where this becomes common knowledge, then that's when humanity will be able to take a massive leap forward, a greater leap than we've ever conceived of before. like a greater leap than the printing press, a greater leap than smartphones, a greater leap than anything we've conceived of conceiving before, because that's when we'll understand that we're one, that we're unified, that we're all together in this, that we can live from a place of love, that we can live in harmony with the rest of the earth and the rest of the cosmos, right? And that there's technology available over there. There are capabilities that we haven't imagined yet. Maybe you've listened to Greg Braden a lot, and he talks often about the idea that many of the technologies that humans develop are things that are meant to enhance natural abilities that we already have, right? Like communication over long distances. We have phones and all this kind of thing, but his argument is that people have that ability. We can naturally communicate over long distances. Maybe you've done it. You think of somebody and then they call you, right? Or remote viewing is another example of that. Or flight. Maybe people in former times, or maybe somewhere within us, we know that we have the ability to astral project and get out of our bodies and go fly someplace and go walk around somewhere else and then come back into our own bodies. And there's stories of yogis in the mountains of the Himalayas that do this today or have done this recently, right? And these are all capabilities that we have. And so my conception of this is that when humanity starts to fully understand that the all is mind and that everything is mental and this is a holographic projection, that's when we make the leap forward. So here's the last question, and this is a hard one. How could you leverage the power of this principle in your life? So how do you leverage the idea of the all in your life? And the way that I say that is when I start to understand that the all encompasses everything that is now, everything that is past, and everything that is future. All future probabilities, right? That's all included within the all. And this is where you start to get into the ideas that Abraham Hicks talks about, of things being in your vortex. Like once you have an idea, once you have a desire, a strong desire, and there's an emotional component tied to it, then that is in your vortex and it's coming towards you now. And this is the idea that Jesus talks about when you pray, when you ask for things, where he says, you don't have because you don't ask. And when you ask, you have to ask as if you have already received it, right? And when you start to understand that the all is mind, and you start to say, oh, that significant person that I want, that amount of money that I want, that career that I want, that, whatever the thing is that you want, when you understand that it already exists for you and you can be thankful for it in the now, then you can start to leverage that principle, right? And then at the same time, you can also leverage that principle because you start to understand that the more you grow and change, and the more you expand, and the more you become forgiving and raise your levels of consciousness, then the more the rest of the world does too. So that's how I leverage the power of this principle in my own life. So that went longer than I thought it would. I hope that was beneficial. I hope that was helpful. Definitely discuss this over in the discussion board in the forum. And I'll see you in there. Thank you very much.